From the moment that the attack took place at Camp Ashraf on September 1st, there has been, for all intents and purposes, within the confines of the United States State Department, a determination not to impute any responsibility or obligation on the government of Iraq, despite every ounce of evidence to the contrary. That attack was a dastardly crime against humanity that was committed by and on behalf of the government of Iraq against the innocent people who were there merely to protect the possessions of the people at Camp Liberty under the very eyes of the United Nations. 1 ounce of evidence after the another has now turned into an irrefutable conclusion that the government of Iraq was indeed responsible for the attack and, more importantly, the taking of 7 hostages that the State Department, in the guise of a Deputy Assistant Secretary, Mr. McGurk, claims are no longer in Iraq. Mr. McGurk has appeared before several committees of Congress to repeatedly attempt to refute any evidence to the contrary in an effort to protect and avoid placing the responsibility on the government of Iraq. And yet, just yesterday, no less an independent, and I underline, a respected independent organization that is highly respected around the world, Amnesty International, issued an urgent report that essentially confirmed what we have been saying from the day that the attack occurred and those hostages were taken hostage, and that is that the hostages are still in Iraq.
And that only gets worse should Iran acquire the nuclear weapon. Unfortunately, those suffering the most under the current regime are the Iranian people, the vast majority of which support a democratic Iran, where they can live free and without fear. And that yearning for freedom also extends to the thousands of Iranians currently at Camp Liberty, who continue to face unwarranted and unprovoked attacks, even though the U.S. has urged the government of Iraq to do more to protect these innocent civilians. I know that you in this room have friends and family there at Camp Liberty to have suffered a great deal at the hands of the Iranian government while trying to bring peace and democracy to your country. The United States needs to do more. We need to hold Iraqi government accountable for its lack of protection of liberty.
Since 2009, there have been 5 assaults, attacks on your friends and your neighbors and your loved ones in Camp Liberty and Camp Ashraf. 5 attacks. And during that period of time, not one person responsible for those attacks has been brought to justice. Not the killers and not the governments who allowed it to happen. This ought not to be. In this latest attack, you all are aware of it, the one that took place in September. There were 42 that survived. Witnesses. I used to be a prosecutor before I was a judge in Texas. And it was just elementary that you talk to the witnesses of a crime. None of these witnesses have been talked to about who committed this crime. Why not? It is an obligation that they be talked to find out who did it. Because you see, this 5th attack is like the other 4. But I think while we're talking to Maliki, when we had the chance, and he comes over here to the United States dragging the sack, wanting to get some more of that American money, we had the chance, and we should have taken it, to look him straight in the eye and say, look at here, That's one word. Look at here. You turn over those captive hostages that are in the possession of Iraq. You determine who committed this crime. You arrest those people, or there's no American money going to you, Mr. Maliki. And we ought to mean it. And we ought to just stop sending that money over there till those people who committed the crime show up, till those hostages that were kidnapped show up, and that people be held accountable.
Now, the September 1st raid on Camp Ashraf has filled us all with anger and with dread. The idea that the Iraqi government had nothing to do with it is an admission by the Iraqi government that they are ignoring their international obligations to defend Camp Ashraf and Camp Hura. But had nothing to do with it. How many checkpoints did the thugs have to go through in order to reach Camp Ashraf? We cannot provide aid to Iraq unless Iraq is dedicated to human rights in its own country and an end to war crimes in Syria.
And to me, this is the breach of a commitment by the United States government on a bipartisan basis now over several administrations that we have not given the inhabitants of Liberty and Ashraf the kind of protection that they need. This is another embarrassment, a stain on the reputation of the United States. We have hostages now taken from Camp Ashraf at the behest of the Iranians. I think there's little or no doubt that the al-Maliki regime has been acting in concert with Iran, and for 2 months now, the State Department's inability or unwillingness to talk about what actually happened at this attack on Camp Ashraf is motivated in large part because of concern about somehow adversely affecting the negotiations with Iran that are going on in Geneva as we speak here today on the nuclear weapons program. I think we have seen documented over several years now that the UN's assistance mission in Iraq, UNAMI, has been not an arm of the United Nations, not an arm of the member governments, but effectively under the control of the al-Maliki regime. This is utterly inexcusable. And it's inexcusable. We thought with a change of personnel at UNAMI that perhaps things would get better. It's only more of the same. It's still business as usual.